One of the things that we have realized that plays a big part in any classroom instructionally is the interaction between the teacher and the student when it comes to engaging them, asking them questions, etc. There's this concept referred to as wait time, and that simply means the amount of time that we wait between a teacher's question and a student's response, or before we move on. Strangely, or I shouldn't say strangely, but what we've seen through the literature is that it is not uncommon to find that teachers might wait an average of 1.5 seconds before answering their own question, asking someone else, or restating the question. And the question becomes, what's going on? Why? Why do teachers feel a need to answer their own question, restate it, rephrase it, ask someone else? And the truth is that pauses after a question feels awkward to a lot of teachers. Start to think, did I not make sense in the question? Am I not teaching effectively? Their own paranoia gets going on and they start answering stuff. We need to learn to wait. We need to learn to pause. It makes good sense from a information processing perspective, very easily explained. Wait time, when we increase wait time, we find some very positive outcomes in the classroom. And I've listed in the PowerPoint 5 very positive outcomes that come from, as a teacher, increasing wait time. One of the ones is we find is increased student participation. When you pause, take a drink of your soda or your coffee or your water, and you allow students to think, we start to see more students participating with pauses. Secondly, you get a better quality of response, student response. Students are given time to think. The quality of their responses improve. Well, another aspect of an improved performances by students or the quality answers, you start to see better classroom performance. Students are able to participate, listen, hear, better responses, leads to better performances, assessments, etc. We also start to see different types or kinds of questions asked, getting away from the right or no, right or wrong answers, or the yes or no responses. When we ask more open-ended questions, we tend to get more elaborative responses. With more elaboration comes better detail, comes greater access to previously learned material. It stores more effectively. Better questions, better responses. And then lastly is overall student and teacher satisfaction. You tend to enjoy the classes more that you participate, that you learn more, that you understand more. You tend to enjoy classes from a teacher's perspective when students seem to be engaged, when they like the material. That's the goal, is to engage the student in material in a meaningful way that they can remember. And sometimes we're our own worst enemy. And wait time is one of those principles that comes into play. Okay? So all of this stuff, we pull it together and we start thinking, okay, so what do I do, Eric, going forward with this information? How do I take this stuff and put it into action as a teacher? Okay, from behaviorist ideas, Piagetian ideas, social cognitive, information processing. Well, one of the goals, and you as a teacher, if I were to ask you, okay, what's our goal as a teacher to help our students in the classroom? And one of the things that we realize is I want my students to be independent learners. I want them to be self-regulated. I want them to be able to approach a problem, to understand what to do, how to go about it, and to use that information in a meaningful way. And one of the things that we realize is that what I like to do instructionally, fundamentally, is I want students to think differently about their learning. Okay, thinking. Well, if I'm talking about our unit on cognition and I'm thinking about their thinking, what do we call that? We call that metacognition. Metacognition is basically thinking about thinking. Well, one of the things that we like to do as teachers is to shape the way that students think, the way that they study. Well, what is the stuff that they're doing in a classroom on any given day? from chemistry to PE to music to math to social studies. Different classes have different content, and we assess them differently. And when we start talking about helping students understand, we talk about metacognitive knowledge and understand the how we influence students' metacognitive activity. We have to realize, and I put it in the PowerPoint there from a knowledge standpoint, we talk about things like personal knowledge, task knowledge, strategy knowledge. Those are fundamentally different things. Personal knowledge is talking about that declarative knowledge, right? What does that mean? Declarative knowledge is, if you think about it, think about stuff like Jeopardy. Knowing a bunch of stuff about a bunch of stuff. Can you declare it? I know this. Capital of Pennsylvania. Who wrote this concerto? Who was the fourth president? Blah, blah. Declarative knowledge. You can declare it, all right? Contrast that with task knowledge, or what we refer to as procedural knowledge, is can I do something with it, right? Can I do something with it? Now, fundamentally, part of procedural knowledge is declarative knowledge. That means in order to do something with that information, to use it, to apply it, you have to have the foundation, right? So certain classes, you're going to find that much of your instruction focuses on declarative knowledge, helping students to be able to use, to see or understand this information and create a foundation that will then, they will be able to, in future classes, or maybe even within the class but at a later date, be able to then procedurally use that information. It's kind of like in physical education, knowing the rules or the equipment or different things, but to put those rules into action. Think about football or soccer. It's very different to know, I know what it is to dribble a ball, I know what it is to pass a ball, but fundamentally, passing and dribbling, we use those in soccer, we use them in basketball, but they operate differently. And then what am I making the connections, and how do I need procedurally? Knowing something and doing something can be two different things. Just think about driver's ed. You take a test, do really well on your driver's ed test. Does that mean that procedurally that you're going to be a great driver? Maybe not, right? So the idea is, in our classroom, we want our students to think about the content and how they're going to use it. But we as a teachers first need to know, what are we asking of our students? Do they need to be able to remember this stuff, to know this stuff, to use this stuff? And some of this will tie back into Bloom's taxonomy. When you think about Bloom's taxonomy, or as a teacher, when you're developing instructional objectives, what do you want them to do with it, right? And as a teacher, from a metacognitive standpoint, I want my students to know stuff, then to be able to use stuff, okay? And that recognize that there are going to be certain strategies, they talk about strategy knowledge as well in metacognitive, that I'm going to use this type of knowledge. For instance, if a teacher is going to just require memorization for an exam, and the students and the assessment, and that's all, and you're just using it to meet the ends of the goal of the class, just to kind of get through the class, you don't really like it, you're not going to use it. Ideally, I'd love for you to be able to apply it, use it. Sometimes the teacher's test necessitates just memorization. Take the test, do well, and move on. They don't ask you to apply it, then where's the need? In a perfect world, I would say that would be great. I want them to be able to apply everything, right? But sometimes if you don't like the stuff and you're just trying to get through it, and the teacher only assesses a low-level, superficial knowledge, it makes total sense that you would just memorize, flashcards, do it, take the test, forget it, move on. But there's other classes that are going to be much more hierarchical in nature, and that's going to be a strategy that's probably going to work against you. So being able to declare it, to understand declarative knowledge, very different than perhaps procedural knowledge. Now, the goal is, in any classroom, any teacher, is after they have this foundation, once they have this knowledge, is I want you to be able to do something with it, right? When I'm asking you to be able to do something with it, we're talking about transfer of knowledge. Can you take that information and apply it in some capacity? All right. Now, ideally, bear with me for a second. My PowerPoint has ceased to work. Ideally, we want to, the idea of transfer is that it's going to, the influence of your prior knowledge, skills, strategies, or principles on new learning. How do I take this? So in the PowerPoint, I talk about, the book talks about it as well. Talked about different instances: positive, negative transfer, specific versus general, low road versus high road. Okay, what does all that stuff mean? The idea of positive transfer is learning something in a particular area, content area, that's going to facilitate learning in future events. So the learning that takes place today influences the learning that takes place in a later date. That's an instance of positive transfer. Negative transfer would be obviously the opposite of that, where learning in one situation will impede the process of learning in another. So something that is in one situation might adversely affect future events. Okay. Specific transfer is where you learn something in one particular area and you find that that knowledge is really adequately meets or transfers into just very similar other areas. So, for instance, when you think about some of the math skills that you learn, some of the algebraic things, you find that they really are algebraic operations, geometric things, geometry. You find that you learn this skill and you're looking for other applications outside of it, and the stuff that you learn really just tends to transfer to other similar situations, to other similar content areas. And so you can't take this learning and apply it in all different parts of life. Whereas in general transfer, you're able to take learning in one situation and apply it into very dissimilar, very different settings. Your time management, you could learn it in one area that could be applied into a lot of other areas. Your understanding of a reasoning or a logic or some of the stuff we learn in philosophy, you might find that helps you organize your writing in a paper because you have a premise and it's grounded, and then you do this. Logic, the teaching of logic, can be applied in a lot of different other areas. So we find that general transfer is learning learning content or a skill or something, and being able to apply it in a very dissimilar setting. For a specific transfer tends to kind of fall into that other area that's more closely related. Then the idea of low road versus high road transfer. Low road transfer, I would say to students, when you think about it, when you take the low road, you take the easy road. Low road transfer speaks to things that transfers very easily with very little effort. You don't have to think about it too much. Whereas high road transfer is much more applied, much more focused, much more requires, I don't want to say abstract, but you really have to think about how you're going to apply it or use it. Okay, so low road transfer would be an example of you come over to my house. I need someone to mow. You drive over to my house and you need to help me mow my yard. Okay, I'm not very good on a tractor, as you can probably understand why. But I've got a couple different tractors. I got this red one. I got this blue one. You drive over here. I ask you to use the red one. Not a problem whatsoever. You hop on the red tractor. Has a steering wheel. You get on there and you go and cut the grass. The blue tractor is one of those zero turn, right? If you've never got on a zero turn before, it's kind of funny watching people because you're used to a steering wheel, and now you've got these bars that do this, and you go and you start mowing, and you get to the end of the mow, and I call it this little waggle, is that people get to the end of a row, and they have to do this to see how do they turn left or how do they turn right. Even though I could have explained to them to do this to turn this way and turn this way, but they get to the end and they can't remember it, so they turn it this way just to kind of get a feel for it. And they do that a few times because they have to cognitively think about how do I turn this lawn tractor, right? You have to think about it. That's a high road. It's application of stuff. Low road is it just transfer from driving your car to driving this tractor, whereas high road transfer is when you're in a specific task or skill and you're having to think about how do I use this stuff going forward. You have to physically, or you have to think of how it's going to be applied. Now, within that idea is how do I facilitate transfer? Okay, I'll talk about that in the next video and shortly finish up here. But the goal is to learn stuff in one class or in classes and be able to apply it in other classes or outside in general skills in life. That's the idea of transfer.